Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore Positive. Hope you're tuning in out in Baltimore Positive land or out in Spotify or out on our Castos or on our YouTube. Certainly, if you are driving anywhere in the next couple of days, take it safe out there. Keep it on AM 1570. We appreciate you. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We're doing a cup of soup or bowl next Monday. Fingers crossed that the weather holds up for us. We will be at Fadley's on Monday. On Tuesday, we're moving to El Guapo in Catonsville. Wednesday, we'll be at Coco's in Lauraville. Thursday, we will be at Pizza John's in Essex. And on Friday, and these are all from noon until 5, just be there in the afternoon, we'll be at Costas. And not the one in Dundalk, the one in Timonium, uptown by the racetrack. We will have scratch offs in the Maryland Lottery, including candy cane cash. Smells like peppermint to give away. My whole bag smells like peppermint. And our friends at GBMC hooking us up here. And remind everybody, be safe out there. Take care of your driveways, pay the kids to shovel the walk, all of that stuff. And I tell you what, Luke's going to shovel his walk, and hopefully the salt will be out by Thursday afternoon, and we'll have the purple plumes of smoke awaiting you as you enter Owings Mills for the very first time with a new head coach on Thursday. Luke, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, so do tell. Questions for Jesse Minter, but more than that, just the weirdness of a new face on the franchise this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's that terribly deep, other than just it's a big deal, right? I mean, it's change. It's someone new. I mean, the idea that now when you think how often the head coach talks compared to the general manager or assistant coaches or the owner or even players, I mean, that individual talks more about the football team than anyone in the organization. So when you're accustomed to it being John Harbaugh for 18 years for him in general, for me being 17 years at least on a part-time basis and 15 years on a full-time basis, it is going to be different. And just the idea of thinking about like Monday press conferences after games and all of that. But as it pertains to this week and the introductory press conference that's scheduled for Thursday, assuming travel and all of that is at least up and running enough by then, I don't think I have anything extremely profound other than just, what is Jesse Minter's philosophy on all this? What does he think about what the Ravens have been from afar over the last 5 years? Not to ask it in a combative way, but what does he plan on changing? What will look different? How does he plan to account for the fact that he's a first-time head coach at any level? I brought up the point as we've been talking about Mike McDonald and the fact that he's going to a Super Bowl in his second year, but go look at his coaching staff. I mean, someone that's on his staff is Leslie Frazier, who was a former NFL head coach. Will Jesse Minter look to bring in somebody like that? Or the fact that Rick Minter, his father, was on the staff with the Chargers. Does he feel that is sufficient in terms of having that kind of a experienced voice that can kind of tell you, hey, this is what it's like to be a head coach? But because Rick Minter wasn't an NFL head coach. So I think you're looking at that. You're looking at, what were his impressions of Lamar from his time in Baltimore previously? What was his relationship like? Has he kept in touch at all? What have the conversations been, in this process, with Lamar, right? I mean, I know you and I talked in a previous segment. Certainly there's a lot of intrigue as far as how involved Lamar or Kyle Hamilton or Roquan Smith, or go down the list of any of your not that Hamilton's a longtime vet, but he has that kind of stature in the organization. How involved were they? What were the conversations like with those guys? So, I think it's funny whenever there is change, there's this thought, and this kind of goes back to some of our initial conversations, that everything's going to be completely different, and what was in place before was completely broken. And no, I don't think the Ravens view it that way. I think this is an opportunity to refresh and revamp. I don't think it's completely changing everything that the Ravens stand for by any stretch of the imagination, but it's someone that's coming in with a fresh perspective. And there's a familiarity, no question, but Jesse Minter's not John Harbaugh. He's not Jim Harbaugh. He's Jesse Minter. He's not Mike McDonald even. He's Jesse Minter. So I think for all of us, and that even goes for someone like me who was around Jesse Minter the tiniest bit, because he's not someone that necessarily was even having a press conference once or twice a year, as even as an assistant coach. He wasn't really even that high on the totem pole his first time around. I think a lot of it's just what's he like? Yeah, you can go on YouTube and you can see him as the Chargers defensive coordinator or as the Michigan defensive coordinator, but it's a way different animal than being the head coach. And I think you're even seeing that with Mike McDonald. The Mike McDonald that I watch from afar now is not the same Mike McDonald that was the Ravens defensive coordinator. Not that he's like disingenuous or changed or anything like that. It's just you're in a different position, right? I mean,
He
you have to
shows well, doesn't he? Mike
who
McDonald.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
let's
of
talk
course.
about him.
Well,
He's a 4.5 point favorite to win the Super Bowl in a week and a half.
sure,
So yeah,
and I think it ties in well with Jesse Minter, because if I had one question about Jesse Minter from afar, and that would have persisted until even the last couple of weeks, when it was apparent that he was on the short list of favorites to be the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, it would be a very similar question that I would have had about Mike McDonald, and it would be, can you command a room as a head coach, as the guy? Do you have that kind of voice? And when I say that, it doesn't mean it's the rah rah, win one for the Gipper kind of speech. I mean, I think that I don't think that necessarily plays as well with the current generation of players. And Kyle Van Noy even indicated recently, kind of gave an interview about he finds that not just in Baltimore, but his other stops, that younger players more and more gravitate towards, they just want to be coached like X's and O's, and like teach them new concepts and new systems and new plays and new ways of going about your craft, more so than like being a motivational speaker. And yeah, that's part of it. That will always be part of it to some degree. But I don't think Mike McDonald is won people over in Seattle and has led to all this success because he's this impassioned, unbelievable speech giver. I think it's because he's really smart about ball, and he's a really good teacher about ball. And I think the Ravens feel in that way they're getting someone similar to that. But I think what we've kind of seen with Jesse Minter, when you kind of see the response of players he had with the Chargers and players that have worked with him in the past, is it's not just that football intelligence, but he has an emotional intelligence to him too that allows him to connect with players. And I think Mike McDonald very much the same way. Isn't necessarily the, who's got it better than us, John, Harbaugh, rah, rah kind of stuff. And again, I'm not being disparaging about
these
that.
guys all like to hang out with people that can make them better and get them paid and help them win.
Yeah, sure. And look, that's not to say there still isn't a place for the kick him in the tail kind of speech and call it like it is and fire guys up. And I mean, Mike McDonald can get fiery. I think Jesse Minter can get fiery, but that's not necessarily going to be their calling card, right? I think in the case of Minter, it's, like Mike McDonald, and this is what the Ravens are hoping they're getting. It's someone who is going to restore what's fallen off the last couple years, which is the Ravens defensive tradition and being really, really sound on that side of the ball. And I think the next challenge is hiring the right people for the offense, for your staff collectively to implement what you want your vision to be. And I don't think that vision is a 180 from anything John Harbaugh wanted to do. I think it's a refresh. It's a new voice, right? I mean, the idea that, you think of big corporations and big companies. I mean, sometimes they change their CEO every few years just because they feel they need a new leader. They need a new direction. So I think in some ways we try to make it way more complicated than it actually is. I mean, it's not like, he's going to be coming in speaking a new language, but at the same time, they do want it to be different. They do want it to be, to be invigorating and to rejuvenate and galvanize, not just the football team, but how about the city and the fan base, right? I mean, if one thing is evident, and Steve Bisciotti can downplay this part of it as much as he wanted, it's very clear that a large large percentage of this fan base was fatigued with John Harbaugh. And I'm not even saying whether that's right or wrong. It's just reality. So part of that is also, yeah, Jesse Minter coming in and first and foremost doing the football things, right? Being a football coach, but also, yeah, rejuvenating people and getting people excited and getting people to believe that not only are the Ravens going to bounce back from being 8-9 this past year, but they're going to be as good as they've been at their best in the regular season under Lamar Jackson, but now have a new voice in place to get over the hump and put past failures behind you and to have these guys in a position to play at their best, not just September, October, November, December, but in January also, and then to finish. And, that's a lot. That's a high expectation, but that's why I've also said, look, if this is going to work, and Jesse Minter would be the first to say this, it's got to be more than just Jesse Minter pulling on the rope. I mean, it's got to be players saying, we've got to be better. We've dropped the ball. We've fumbled. We haven't played our best in January. We haven't played our best in the fourth quarter of some of these games. That wasn't all John Harbaugh by any stretch of the imagination. So if everyone buys into that mentality and you've got the new guy in place and you've got new coaches in place and you've got talent and Eric DaCosta is making some improvements with parts of the roster that need to be better. There's no question about that being a factor as well. If you do all that, then yeah, this team should be in a position that they should be right back in the mix of looking like one of the top contenders in the AFC. Now, I think there's more room now when you're looking at New England, who's obviously going to the Super Bowl, and Denver especially when Bo Nix is back. And, so it's not just going to be necessarily the revert to Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, but there's still plenty to like about this football team. And you're hoping
there's transition, right?
It's a transition, no doubt.
The conference it will never be recognized the same way again. It will never be Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh and John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Maybe Mahomes and Reed crank it back up, but McDermott and Allen are broken up now. So this is,
yeah.
And Burrow, by the way, stays together with the coach that you wanted fired, that Flacco jumped up and said the greatest things in the world about. I would expect Flacco to be back as the backup in Cincinnati. I mean, in my mind. By the way, Joe's coming on this week. Joe said to me, I got to take care of my kids, man. They're home from school, but I'll figure it out. So Joe will be coming on here this week at some point. So I'll talk to a real Super Bowl MVP and champion around here, even though they try to take it away from him. But so there, breaking news.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think you look at all that, and there's also no guarantee that when you make a change, and this is where I'd say, as much as I like the Jesse Minter hire, do I know 100% that he's going to be a great NFL head coach? No, you never really know, right? You never really know until a person is in that spot and you see what the infrastructure is around him. And look, all of that on paper looks like that should be good.
That's
right?
A question for Bisciotti and for Eric to say,
don't know.
How do you know this is the guy? Well, what makes you believe this is the guy who's going to win a champion, that's going to take Lamar and we're going to be in the Super Bowl next year? Because y'all believe we have enough talent for that. You don't believe Pittsburgh has enough talent for that, but you believe the Ravens have enough talent for that. You believe Buffalo, I don't know. Word in Buffalo was the coach went in and said, we don't have enough talent, and they fired him over it. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I was making the point that when you do make a change of this magnitude, whether you're talking about the Ravens, whether you're talking about Buffalo, whether you're talking about Tomlin, even though he stepped away and wasn't fired, because Rooney made it apparent in his press conference that he was willing to run it back with Mike at least one more year, if that were going to be the case. So, but you kind of look what you perceive to be a great organization. It doesn't necessarily last forever, right? I mean, look at New Orleans now, and that's not even to say that they're not in a good place with, a young quarterback who looked promising in his rookie year, but look at how you perceive the Saints now compared to how you perceived them 15 years ago, right? When Sean Payton was there. Look at the Patriots prior to this year, post Belichick and Brady, or not even post Belichick. I mean, even the last few years with Belichick.
Dude, everybody's lived long enough to see Michael Jordan not be with the Bulls anymore,
and then
you
see what the Bulls have been
anymore,
then,
or
right?
whatever it is.
Nothing lasts forever.
When Ovechkin leaves DC, watch out. right?
I mean,
Like,
think about what the Yankees were in the late '80s, right? I mean, like, so you always have these, the ebb and flow of franchises for as much as you kind of view, all right, it feels like Kansas City's going to be good forever. And, the Ravens have, for the better part of 25 years, been one of the model organizations. Whether that's translated in January over the last decade or not is certainly a different story. But at least in terms of what they've been in the regular season and being in the mix. But you also understand that that's not a guarantee that that's going to last forever. I mean, there was a point in time where the Chicago Bears, when you go way, 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 way back, were, the class of the NFL. That hasn't been the case in a really long time in Chicago. So, so the point is when
I'd say Baltimore Orioles. We'll transition to that
yeah,
soon, but
yeah,
there's a
absolutely.
history, and then
The
there's a
Orioles in the
current.
60s through the 80s, and
Yeah,
then you see what it becomes. So, like, that's where I look at Buffalo right now and say, look, I love Josh Allen, but man, man, say what you want about Steve Bisciotti in the Ravens press conference or anything like that. Man, if I'm a Bills fan watching that press conference, man, I'm worried. I'm really, really worried by that. But with how the owner conducted himself there and things, even just his rationale for firing McDermott, the idea that he's saying he didn't make the decision until the outcome of that game, and
it was weird, sort of old guy billionaire
really
fanboy checked
weird.
out, and that you and I got into it earlier about the Steelers and what Mr. Rooney wants. Look at that Pagula guy. This guy Jimmy Haslam's got half criminal in him, right? And running around, and they're all behind guarded gates, and they are they're a part of Mar-a-Lago. They're a part of Trumplandia. They're a part of I'm a billionaire and I'll do whatever I want. And it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. It makes sense to me. That press conference made sense to Terry Pagula. It did.
Yeah.
And Steve coming in there 2 weeks ago, like Tony Montana, made sense to him because that's who he is. I'm a billionaire. I'm going back on my boat. I mean, they're all. Meanwhile, Art Rooney is just this. I live in Pittsburgh and I want to keep things simple and I'm getting older and I want comfort. And I want. Look, the Ravens chose comfort too. Eric DaCosta and Steve Bisciotti chose comfort over. We don't know that guy so well. They chose. We know him. That's better for us because to your point, there are five other guys that could have been good coaches here, including Mike McDonald a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, it's one thing to have comfort. It's another thing to say, like, what are you hoping to accomplish? And that's where, I certainly question Mike McCarthy in Pittsburgh, more so because, like, where are you going? What are you trying to do? Are you going to try to bring back Aaron Rodgers again? Like, what are you doing there? And in Buffalo, I would say, I mean, you look at that dynamic with Brandon Beane, and I mean, he gets a promotion. I mean, I think if anyone watched the Bills this year, I think you were certainly questioning. I had more roster questions than like how hard they played or what the play calling was like or, anything like that. So,
Doing that press conference 2 weeks ago, DaCosta looked like a hostage sitting there, right? So, like, and again, the pressure is now on. And to your point, you said something flippant to me off the air the other day. It's like, Steve, where you been? Is Steve gone for 8 years? Is Steve showing up Thursday? Is the owner gone again and checked out again until whatever point he's going to fire somebody? And that would be Eric's department if the next time next time he's going to show up is to fire somebody or to claim the trophy. I don't know. I'm asking these questions rhetorically, but there is a sense in this organization that you and I could manage it, right? We just get the secondary guys better. You need some help. You need a pass rush. You need to do better on the offensive line. We need to get Lamar fully into the building and fully like most of that's DaCosta stuff. Only a little bit of that is Minter stuff as I see it in the coming next 90 days. Minter's not doing the draft. He's going to coach him up once we bring him in. I don't have a lot of questions for Jesse Minter this minute because I'm going to see that. My questions are more about the organization at this point and saying, like you said, what are you trying to do here? You're trying to win with Lamar, and that would mean different offensive line. Where are we with Derrick Henry? I mean, there's a lot of roster questions, but I
yeah.
don't know that they're Jesse Minter questions.
Well, I mean, I think they're questions, but I think a lot of it's you're not going to know. I mean, you're just not going to know. I mean, he's going to put together a staff, and we've already talked about a couple of the names on that staff. I mean, Mike Mickens from Notre Dame's coming in to coach the secondary, and that looks good. Everything see about him and what you've read about him on social media, and you look at some of the talented defensive backs that he's worked with, including Kyle Hamilton, going back a few years ago at Notre Dame, you say, okay, that makes sense. That
You're going
looks
to
good.
energize Kyle Hamilton. Now you
Sure.
want to win a Super Bowl. Energize him. Now get the quarterback energized too.
Well, well, and look, I don't know how much energizing Kyle Hamilton needed. I don't think that was necessarily a problem, but you certainly want to bring in coaches that your players respect. I was going to
If
say
Kyle Hamilton
like,
says that's the best coach I've ever played for and get him in here and they got him in here and there's a relationship already, I
well,
feel
there was
good about that if I'm a fan of the team. I feel even better about that if I'm Eric DeCosta.
sure, sure, and like I said, I mean Mickens and Jesse Minter had a relationship going back to Jesse Minter being a grad assistant, and Mickens being a player at Cincinnati. So you look at that, but yeah, that's really important. I mean, coaching matters. I'll go back to you and I talking about this and people that we respect indicating to us this past season that their coaching left something to be desired. And that wasn't even necessarily John Harbaugh specifically. It was the staff collectively as a unit, not necessarily getting the best they could out of individuals. I mean, Steve Bisciotti made it very apparent at the press conference a couple weeks ago that he didn't identify them by name, but he made it pretty darn clear that they weren't enamored with the job that George Warhop had done with the offensive line, right? The idea that you saw the steps that the O-line had taken the year before, and then that guys had either plateaued or regressed. I assume speaking of Daniel Faalele and Voorhees specifically. So all that matters. I mean,
It
this
is
staff.
interesting when the guys stink, you blame the coaches too, to
Well,
some
I mean,
degree, you know?
I look,
We blame the players all year long. The owner came in and blamed the coach.
it's both. I mean, I no, I've said quite often that I wasn't necessarily enamored with the job that George Warhop had done. It's, that's our biggest problem is we do either or, right? I mean, and one of my pet peeves about modern social media fandom, and I don't mean Ravens or Orioles here, I mean in general, is and I don't know if it's because you wear the players' names on your jerseys or your T-shirts or whatever, and you generally don't have, no one wears John Harbaugh's polo that he's wearing on the sideline, right? That you're wearing Lamar Jackson's jersey, or you're wearing Kyle Hamilton's jersey, or Ray Lewis, or Ed Reed, right? But there's I think modern fandom on social media, and understanding social media is a percentage of what we would consider quote real fans. But for me, I see it all the time where when you win, the players get all the credit. When you lose, the coaches and the officiating get all the blame. So in reality, we know the truth is somewhere in the middle there. I've said it. Ravens players need to be better. Like one of the big messages that I'm hoping those guys have internally is, all right, John Harbaugh is gone. Todd Monken's gone. Zach Orr's going to be gone. All of that. You guys better be better because Mark Andrews, John Harbaugh had nothing to do with you fumbling the ball and dropping the ball in Buffalo. And John Harbaugh had nothing to do, Zay Flowers, with you fumbling the ball across the goal line in the AFC title game 2 years ago. And say what you want about what was happening with our defense, but there was examples of poor technique and guys not being in the right spot and miscommunication. And yeah, that's coaching. Coaching has to be accountable for their part of that, but that's also the players. So it's never like one person. There's no thought here that Jesse Minter alone is going to make the Ravens a Super Bowl winner. It's going to be Jesse Minter and new coaches coming in and players being rejuvenated and working. I don't want to say working harder, meaning they didn't work hard last year, but how about we say working smarter and learning from past experiences and understanding that, okay, the Ravens got rid of the coaching staff. If you thought that was a problem, but you need to be better, right? So there needs to be that at work as well. And yeah, that goes for Lamar Jackson. That goes for everyone on the roster, right? So I think you're hoping that when you make a change that's this drastic, and this is a drastic change in terms of the history of the Baltimore Ravens, when you're talking about only the fourth head coach in three plus decades, then yeah, it's time to step up. It's time for everyone to grow up and learn from what happened the last couple years and learn from, your past failures and past heartbreaking losses and blown fourth quarter leads, and to not let that happen again. Don't let the same things happen under the new guy, because if they do, guess what that leads everyone to believe? It makes everyone believe it was you were the problem more so than the coaching, if that continues to happen. So they've changed up the variables, right? New coaches. But if the same exact things happen, then I'm much more inclined to point the finger at this group of players then. So, but that's also making an assumption that Jesse Minter is going to come in and do a good job, and the new coaching staff is going to come in and do a good job. And I think the Ravens have a lot of conviction that that's going to happen. But until we see it, right? Until they roll the ball out in the second Sunday in September, yeah, there's going to be some unknown. There's going to be some mystery about that. So, I've seen a lot of people make the point, and it's tough to disagree with this, where they just kind of sit back and say, look, the Ravens have been really good at hiring head coaches. I mean, the last two head coaches they hired won Super Bowls within their first 5 years. It's kind of difficult to look at that and really doubt what they do. So in that way, if the Ravens felt Jesse Minter was the best decision for them, then I'll sign off on that. That said, there's never 100%. And we can go back and look at a lot of head coaches over the years that get hired, and the teams love them when they hire them. And then a year later, or 2 years later, or 3 years later, they kind of say, well,
Well, Cleveland's about to do that again. Davis's kid's
yeah,
about to do that again.
sure.
Arizona, the Bidwell guys are about to do that again. And we speak about these billionaires, and I talk a lot about Bisciotti around here, and Mr. Rubenstein and Mr. Angelos before that. And like, you think Steelers fans think Rooney is nuts for hiring a 63-year-old qualified, imminently way more qualified than even Jesse Minter to do this, because he's been doing it for 30 years, in the same way that Aaron Rodgers looked more qualified to run the offense to some degree than some other guys, because he can get up to the line of scrimmage and change out in and out of plays. There is something about, Marvin said this to me 15 years ago. We do get smarter. Like, you think we get dumber, but we really do get smarter about this. John, where is that, right? He's up in New York. He's smarter than he's ever been, more highly paid, more powerful, more omniscient, more like, dude, he's held the record for blowing second half leads. Couldn't win with Lamar. I mean, like, that's what he is here. Here he's empty at the upper deck. Up there, he's a genius. So it's in the eye of the beholder. It
Yeah.
really is. And the Jesse Minter thing, because I know Eric so well, and if it feels very much like an Eric pick to me, and I know enough about Eric to say Sashi Brown ain't picking our football coach. Like, I could see that being a real problem inside. Now, whether Sashi's hiding or he's going to be on the dais representing Steve, representing ownership, ownership. Um, I'm interested to see how they move forward here after the Bisciotti steamer 2 weeks ago, and now they have a new person in. Is it just going to be all Jesse? Let Jesse do it. Ray Rice punched two in the elevator. Put Jesse out in front of it at 9 o'clock at night for CNN. Like, he gets to be the mayor of that too. Um, I'm interested to see. To me, it's an Eric Jesse thing. If I'm
Yeah.
predicting it, um, that's really the magic in it. And Eric probably loved him in the hallway a decade ago. And I think the Eric we saw last week, this somber, sullen Eric, should look like the happiest guy in the house on Thursday, bringing this kid home. There should be purple balloons. Lamar should be in the back. Jameis Winston should even come in and fist bump the new coach like he did up in New York. Like, to me, I want to see fresh air. I want to see secretaries and Chad Steele and all of your buddies in PR be so excited that Jesse Minter's there, and what a great, good-looking guy, what a nice guy, and he's going to be everything to everybody's a leader, his natural born leadership, and all that stuff we saw with John a week ago up in New York that I saw, and I thought, oh my God, he's built for this. I mean, he is just built to go do Johnny Bravo. Jesse Minter hasn't done any of that. John's been doing it for 20 years. John does it in his sleep in the way that McCarthy just does ball coach. At that podium that you and I were at down in Dallas, in the media room down there. He does ball coach. He does it easily. John had 100 faces for all of that. John had 100 moods in all of it. I'm interested to see what countenance Jesse Minter comes out on his best day, the day he got the biggest job in the world, and what kind of galvanizing the building. Remember how Ben Johnson ran around the building in Chicago? Right? I mean, I want to see some energy. I want to see the new day of Ravens football and wash out the John culture, but I don't think they're washing out the John culture at all. I think they're bringing it right. They're bringing in. Ryan Clark said the other day, they didn't hire Harbaugh. They hired Harbaugh Jr. Jr. And I thought that's pretty good. Harbaugh Jr. Jr. And I don't know if he's going to shake that or be that. I'm interested to see because his press conferences have been. I've gone back and watched Michigan Rose Bowl, and he's coached some big games. Yeah, I went back and watched him, and I'm interested to see how that authenticity translates. Because to your point, he's going to be in front of you 5 days a week. He's going to be in front of the fans 5 days a week for the next however long until he wins or loses, until he gets fired.
Yeah, but I would also stress that it is only the opening press conference, and Nick
Dan
Sirianni,
Campbell didn't win his.
he did. Nick Sirianni did not win his, and Nick Sirianni has an abrasive personality at times, but he's also won Super Bowl. He's won a Super Bowl, so you kind of have to look at it through that lens and understand. Yeah, it's important, but it's important in the here and now. And then on the flip
that
side,
abrasive personality thing wears people out in the building. That's what Andy Reid doesn't have in Kansas City. You know what I mean? That's what Mike Tomlin probably didn't have in Pittsburgh. And that's something about John got so much power. Were not a lot of people in that building, as I remember it, that liked John Harbaugh. And especially upon my exit, who came forward to me to say, there's a little phony baloney in John Harbaugh that may play well in New York. And I've called it, I've experienced John Harbaugh beyond phony baloney. Like, wait, fraud is where that's phony baloney's a little putting on an act or whatever. I think there are a lot of people in the building that are happy that there'll be a new way, and they want a new way and a better way and a different way and a more emotionally intelligent way, especially a lot of women I know. And I'm interested to see how that translates, or whether Eric was really okay with John's worst demons and sitting with Trump and doing things that probably weren't in the best interest of keeping relationships in his building or with decent humans in the aftermath of all of this.
Like I said, I mean, it's going to be an opening press conference. There's going to be excitement. But on the flip side, he could hit a grand slam of an opening press conference and then not be a great coach, right? I mean,
I think he's a good coach. There's no question about that. Head coach is different, right?
No, yeah. I'm not suggesting. I mean, look, I think he checks every box. Relatively speaking, he checks every box he could as a first-time head coach, and as someone who's acknowledging that my preference in a vacuum would have been an offensive-minded head coach to pair with your franchise quarterback, just because of that dynamic. But if you don't believe the next Sean McVay is there, then you can't make someone who's not the next Sean McVay into hoping he's the next Sean McVay. You know what I mean? Like,
but you can also, if you're Eric, sit on the dais, and Eric can play Tony Montana, or at least better than Fredo at this point, and sit up and say, you know what? We didn't think the building was broken. So F you, Nestor and Preston, and anybody that thinks our culture was, we like our culture here. Well, we think it's good. And we like Harbaugh. And we thought Harbaugh won a lot of games here. And this guy's from the Harbaugh cloth, and he brings the best of John, the best of Jim, and he's his own man. And you're like, I'll get all of that. And we got good players here. And I'm Eric DeCosta, and I bring good players in here. We got the best quarterback in the league. And, I want to see a little Freddie Blassie in selling him up a little bit, to say, because they really did hire Harbaugh Jr. Jr. I mean, like, that's going to stick on this show at least, because for now they changed the personality. I don't think they've changed the system, or that's what Kyle Hamilton's going to like about it. I don't know whether that's what Lamar's going to like about it or not, but they're going to have offensively, Lamar's going to have to learn a new language, going to have to go back to the study book if they bring in someone that's not speaking Monken or speaking Roman at this point. And that's going to have to be sold. There's a lot of hard work that has to be done. And Minter's in the middle of all of that and he's going to be drinking from the fire hose from the beginning. But he doesn't have to figure out where the building is. He knows the Beltway. He lived here for 5 years. He knows people in the building. All of that is a huge challenge for John Harbaugh that's going in there and firing people that have been in the building for 30 years and pissing everybody off.
Yeah, sure. The one thing else, I'll continue to push back a little bit on the Harbaugh Jr. thing in the way that, like, is Mike Macdonald Harbaugh Jr.? He doesn't really come across that way. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying he has no similarities, but I mean, Mike Macdonald worked for both Harbaugh brothers, and I just I hear the point you're making, and of course there's familiarity there, but
I
like,
like Mike McDonald more. He never lied to me. So you asked me a question, my mouth
okay,
was full. I was
okay,
like,
but well, but you're automatically just typecasting Jesse Minter as Harbaugh Jr. when Mike Macdonald, you don't say that about
I
Mike
think
Macdonald,
Jesse
and
Minter has been under the Harbaugh coaching academy system the last 10 years, and that's what they love about him.
but
And that's
wasn't
why they
Mike
hired him.
but Mike Macdonald, you could say the same exact thing about Mike Macdonald. Like, I don't understand, like, how is
But
that any
Seattle
different?
was importing that, not
Okay,
trying to keep it.
okay.
Here we're trying to keep the Harbaugh way. And
Well,
I
you know
think
what?
that
And this is where I'll go back and say, like, the Harbaugh way is being talked about like this team was going 4-13 the last 6 years or something like that. I
that's
mean,
my point. Eric
yeah,
should burr up and say that, and will. And
and he
we'll say
should.
we
That's why I
didn't
said
want
this is a
we
refresh
didn't
rather
want
than a
Cliff
rebuild.
Kingsbury to come in and tell us everything that's wrong here, or Joe Davis to come in and say, I don't like this, or I'm going to change that, or it's going to be the Joe Davis way that's more of the McDermott, wherever the trees come from, whatever the way is going to be. But it's very clear there is a Harbaugh way that is the reason John got $100 million. It's the reason his brother got paid in LA. And part of that has nothing to do with lying, cheating, stealing, because they're willing to do all that. Clearly, the Michigan thing was filthy for his brother. And this guy was a part of that. So, there is a Harbaugh way. It is a very successful way. And this organization didn't want to break those eggs because they had a chance to import a new thing, somebody Eric didn't know well that would fight with him and all that. They didn't want that. They don't feel like they need that. Now they're going to have to go win with what they've had. Listen, I'm not betting against them. They got a lot of talent. I think Eric's a smart general manager. I think he's smart enough to hire a coach he can get along with that's going to get along with Lamar. I'm going to give him all the benefit of the doubt. But it is the Harbaugh way, and they're
I,
committed to that.
I just think it's kind of unfair to just typecast someone as like that. He's like the third Harbaugh brother. Like, I think each individual person's different. I think Jesse Minter's been away for 5 years. I mean,
Working for the other Harbaugh, primarily.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, but he's still his own person, and
Well, let's see. Let's see. I mean, I am fascinated by all of it,
and I would also say,
I'm
like,
also
I mean,
I'm upbeat about it. I don't think this
yeah,
guy's going to fail.
um,
I don't.
I just think it's, I don't know. I think you had a 18th year head coach who won a lot of games. Had it gotten stale here at the end? Sure, we can call it however we want. I mean, they didn't win. They were 8-9. They missed the playoffs, all of that. But at the same time, Jesse Minter, has he worked for both Harbaugh brothers? Sure. Does that mean he's exactly like them? No. I'll continue to reject that. I'll continue to say it. I've worked for you a long time. You and I are not that alike as it comes to,
Not even really
like,
much at all,
so
actually.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, so, like, to me, it kind of imitates life. I mean, you know, lots of people have lots of bosses and people they work with, and even people they get along with fine, but they couldn't be any more different, right? So, and look,
Well,
I'm not
that's
saying,
where you ask Jesse Minter if he's his own guy and he's really an honest guy. Which, again, with John by the end, I'm worn out on the fraudulence of John Harbaugh in a general sense for what's in my phone as a human being and what I've known for 20 years. With Jesse Minter, I am way beyond give him the benefit of the doubt of being his own guy. But
yeah,
then the questions are, you work for John, you work for Jim, you know everything about the way they do things. What's going to be different? And that is the press conference on Thursday, right?
yeah,
That's the same thing that Lamar wants to know. It's the
yeah.
same thing that everybody in the build, Kyle Hamilton wants to know. What's going to be different around here? That's the press conference. And then you're going to tell me, and then you're going to show me, and then the media and the fans are going to hold you accountable. And when they're streaming out of the upper deck because you're losing your sixth home game this year and shouting "fire you," which even happened to Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, and they're both going to the Hall of Fame. Um, that's where it is. But he has to win everybody over. He has to win me. They're not winning me over because they're locking me out of the press conference on Thursday. So I will have no relationship with him other than the right Dear Jesse notes, and he can count on those. But I'm looking at it from the outside and saying, what's going to change? How is this different? Hiring a Harbaugh disciple, Harbaugh Jr., hiring a disciple of both of the men that he's going to come in. He knows that's the first question. So how are you different than Jim and John? Well, first off, I don't lie and I'm not a fraud and I don't come out here. First off, I'm going to get along with Lamar. I'm going to, we're going to do things differently here. We're going to do this different and that different. And I believe in this differently. And I don't know. I don't know what his philosophy is. I just know he's worked under that philosophy and thrived under that philosophy and gotten a gig under that philosophy to, in many, many ways, fulfill that destiny with that philosophy. Because if they wanted a different philosophy, they would have hired somebody different. And that's clear. So they like the house that John built. And they want to keep it similar, not the same, won't be the same. But I think that is the press conference on Thursday. If they say anything else, they're lying. We got big changes we got to make. No, you don't. We win a lot of games around
I don't
here.
think they're going to say that.
Yeah, they're going to say this allows the bump in the water and we keep it smooth, as opposed to there was an earthquake underwater and we've all gone flying and we have to start from scratch, which you think Pittsburgh should have done. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I'm locked out of it. I'm going to watch it in a little box. But this is one of those days where they would do well to invite me. Like I told the Orioles, you do well to invite me so I could come in and smell the air and see if it smells better. Because I know what it smelled like before. It smelled like people like me who aren't allowed to smell the air. I mean, really? The air's that good that Luke can breathe it and Nestor can't? So I want to see how that changes a little bit. Because John was a giant personality, especially once he wore the crown. No one knows that better than you, right?
Sure. And some of what you're talking about, like I don't disagree, but I also like you're also not reinventing the wheel. It's about winning football games and putting players in position to succeed and building a roster that's going to be a championship caliber.
And Eric and John would both say we were very close to that this year.
Right.
We really were. Yeah.
And again, like the idea of the Harbaugh way or the Andy Reid way, like there's a lot of overlap with those things. Like I don't think organizations are drastically different all the times. I think winning organizations, yeah, they're going to be different and like they're different personalities, things like that, but there's still going to be common principles in place. I mean, there are only so many different ways to win, is kind of my point. So, I think sometimes we got to get lost in the weeds here as far as like, well, how much is going to change? Yada, 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 yada. I mean, at the end of the day, it's football, right? It's not rocket science. So at the same time, bring in someone that is smart and connects with young men. You're one thing you're talking about right off the bat here is someone who's 20 years younger than his predecessor, who is not the same age as Lamar Jackson and Kyle Hamilton, but closer in age to those guys. And, some of the other guys that they're bringing in, like Mike Mickens, who's coached at the collegiate level here in recent years. And, that right off the bat, you might connect a little bit differently in the same way that a former NFL player might connect with current players as a coach. That said, you still need to bring something to the table. There still needs to be enough substance there. It's not younger just for the sake of being younger. So, yeah, I mean, I think
I think he's going to show well on Thursday.
I think
in a general sense. Yes,
I think he will too. At the same
time,
I'm
interested to see how he shows on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday after wins, after losses.
Yeah.
Because that's where John was really a box of chocolates as a human being, as an honest man, as a countenance, as a just consistency of what you were going to get from him inside or outside of the building. And he led with the paranoia, and he really did. And I can say that I've covered hundreds of coaches, dozens on the inside. And I John was a unique cat in that way. So yeah.
But I would also say, and I'll leave you with this, that Jesse Minter is a human being and he's going to be a head coach for the first time. Like right off the bat, as much as I think it'll go well on Thursday, he might be nervous, and that might come through a little bit, and people might be critical of that in the same way that they,
Well, this is
we can
big
talk.
for him, right?
He might be nervous, and it might not be
Yeah.
the most polished thing ever. At the same time, that doesn't mean he's not going to be a great football coach. And you know what? He might hit a grand slam on Thursday with the press conference, and he might sound like the most brilliant football mind of all time. That doesn't guarantee that it's going to go the way they want it to go either, right? So my point is, yes, I understand the interest on it, and everyone's excited and looking forward to it, and everyone's looking forward to seeing who he's going to hire and bring in and all of that. But there's going to be some unknown here. And some of that is also you're hiring someone who has never been a head coach at the high school level, the college level, or in the NFL. He's there is still going to be there needs to be some expectation that he might slip up once or twice here or there, right? And but that's why I said it's important for him to hire a good staff. He wants to have great assistants. It's probably important for him to have a couple veteran assistants on that staff to help him with some of what I just mentioned. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of conviction here that they feel that they've hired someone that's going to be a good head coach. And that doesn't guarantee that they're going to win the Super Bowl in the next year or two. But I think they have a lot of conviction that Jesse Minter is as well equipped as anyone out there to put them in a position to be able to win a
And one
Super
of the
Bowl
reasons
at
is
some
because
point
he
in the
was
next
in
few
their
years.
building for 5 years and they know him and they're
Sure,
comfortable with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's
sure.
good. That's good.
That tends
But
to,
that is a
yeah,
decision. That is a
that's fine.
decision and that is a strategy. And we'll attack it thusly. Luke will be at the press conference on Thursday. I will not, unless Chad Steele changes his mind or Jesse Minter insists. Otherwise, I'll just be here digging out like all the rest of us waiting for the next snowstorm. We're doing a cup of soup or bowl next week. We're not going to Santa Clara. We're not going to San Francisco. Who wants to go anyway? Patriots are there to them. So we'll be watching the game on TV. Candy cane cash from the Maryland Lottery. I'll have scratch offs to give away. Our friends at GBMC as well, putting us out on the road for the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. It is our special week. Monday, we begin things at Faidley's at Lexington Market. Tuesday, we will be at El Guapo, not State Fair, across the street, El Guapo. We have Pozole over there. It's going to be delicious. A little chicken tortilla soup for me. Wednesday, we'll be at Coco's. I'll have the cream of crab soup there. Thursday, we'll be at Pizza John's in Essex. I have the French fries and the gravy there. And then on Friday, closing things down will be at Costas, not the Dundalk location, the new location in Timonium at the racetrack. He is Luke. I am Nestor. We are celebrating the 25th anniversary. Oh my God. No wonder there's silver up in here. Of the Ravens Super Bowl 35 miracle. Wednesday, the 28th, it is 25 years to the day. Whiskey Joe's, the late, great Bobby Nick. Pictures. I even have some video that I'm going to throw up from the parade. And all of it lives at Baltimore Positive right in the middle aisle. 25 years later, Purple Rain. And by the way, for good measure, I got Brandon Stokely coming on from Denver in the aftermath of the snow and the mess out there. And also Joe Flacco is going to be joining us this week to talk about the Purple Rain 2, the other miracle, and football and the Cincinnati Bengals. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We're around all week. And if you put on the radio and you hear Tony Saragusa or you hear Rod Woodson or Ray Lewis or Brian Billick, we are celebrating 25 years in a way that only we can. We're WNST AM 1570 Towson. Baltimore, we never stop talking. The next Super Bowl and Jesse Minter and Lamar Jackson and all that good stuff. Stay with us.